Welcome to the new and improved Tardis Talk, the weekly podcast where we discuss all things Doctor Who. So, it's back after nearly a year of waiting. The 13th Doctor's returned to our screens with the epically penned Series 13 Flux, and hot off the press from broadcast, we're here to bring you a review of Episode 1, The Halloween Apocalypse. Do all good things come to those who wait? Let's find out. I'm Chris, and dissecting this week's episode with me are my podcast regulars, Cook and Matt. Hello, gents.
Hello.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Happy
Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
I was going to say, we're recording this literally just after the episode.
It's now
close to the market we could get it.
Yeah, it's 7:30, isn't it? So we haven't even really discussed what we just absorbed in the broadcast, which finished, 15 minutes ago? 15 minutes ago. So
I don't even think I've absorbed it.
I don't either, to be honest. There was so much going on to try and take in. And normally, when we're watching this together, we'll message each other and stuff, won't we? But I felt like in the first 10 minutes I had to put my phone down and just concentrate because there was just so much.
I heard you buzzing backwards and forwards, so I just got to the point where I threw the phone away. I was like, no.
Well, that was within the first 10 minutes, and then I just sort of put it. I couldn't look away.
Yeah, so basically, Series 13 of Doctor Who has returned. It's been a year since we had last Doctor Who on TV, which was New Year's Day. Well, not a year. It's been 10 months, isn't it, since we had last new Doctor Who? But it's been about when was Series 12?
Almost 2 years since Series 12 started.
Wow. Okay,
yeah,
so
a year and 10 months basically.
There's been a lot. There's been a lot to kind of pick up on since then, I suppose, hasn't there? And I guess kind of the key thing really is the Series 12 left a lot of questions, like the Timeless Child and what they called the
Division.
The Division, thank you. Yeah. So there's lots of questions that are being left up, and from what I can tell, the story so far, or what they're alluding to, is basically around the Division, from what I can tell, based on the very little that we know so far anyway, the bits and bobs that we picked up. You were just saying before, Cook, weren't you? You want to rewatch it because there was just so much going on at such a pace.
Yeah.
I
think that is a definite must rewatch.
Oh,
definitely.
To be honest. Structurally, they're doing Series 13 Flux. We'll call it Flux. They're doing Flux differently to any other series because this is the first time in New Who that we've had a serialised format where each episode cliffhangers into the next episode. So this is going to be interesting to see how this pans out. And there's just a lot of concepts that are happening simultaneously in this particular overall season that are going to make following it quite interesting and quite difficult, I think, to some respects anyway. I don't know. Story. Is there a story? Did we glean a story? Was there enough to go on, or was it breadcrumbs?
It's definitely an opener.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hugely.
It's a big setup.
Do we think they packed too much in? Is there a possibility that they kind of over-egged it a little bit?
It entirely depends on how the next 5 episodes go.
Well, yeah, that's a very good point.
I think putting the episode as a whole together, as opposed to thinking about what might be lying ahead, I think there's the right amount of blend there of intrigue as to what's happening with all the other, like we haven't phrased at this point in time, subplots or future plots that might come up. Whereas we spent still quite a lot of time with Yaz, Dan, the Doctor, and going around beginning their being thrown into the middle of everything. But there was enough breadcrumbs out there actually to make us feel really interested into and what's happening there and what's happening there.
Exactly.
What's going on next.
Yeah. I couldn't put it any better.
I think from my point of view, though, because if you think about it, we've got what's going on with Rinda, what's going on with the Angels, what's going on at Liverpool, what's going on with the Sontarans, and what's going on with Dan's girlfriend, whose name sadly has escaped me.
Diane.
Diane, thank you. Not a girlfriend, so it's maybe potential love interest. That kind of sets up the next 5 episodes with the 5 different plots, and I'm keen to see if they're going to do it in this fashion where they're trying to tell a lot of stories at once, or if we're going to get dedicated episodes to each one of these plot points.
Yes.
So I'm interested to see how it evolves.
Indeed. Because there's I think what they've done is they basically set up the scene for each episode, and they're going to focus on these threads more thoroughly. That's my assumption anyway. They're going to focus on these threads more thoroughly. So obviously I'm going to get his name wrong. Joseph Williamson, is that the name of the Victorian guy?
Tunnel dude.
Yeah, he was basically tunneling under Liverpool. So we're obviously going to focus on him at some point. We're going to focus on the Sontarans next week. Vinder's probably going to get a hell of a lot more stuff going on that we're going to get to kind of see, I suppose, at some point. So there's all these different little threads that I think we're going to focus on fully. Of course, there are elements that we're aware of that we didn't even get a glimpse of today from the Flux season trailer. So I'd give a spoiler warning, by the way, for any of our listeners. If you are listening to this and you're worried about spoilers, you're probably picking the wrong sort of time to be watching a review, I suppose. But the Cybermen didn't even show up in this particular episode, but everything else was touched upon slightly, which is interesting. So what's that going to imply? But in terms of story, let's just unpack it basically at its most fundamental level. The Doctor is trying to find out information about the Division, aka her shrouded background, and we have this universe-ending swarm of Flux, whatever the hell those two sentences put together mean, basically just wiping out the universe. That's basically what's happening. The universe is ending, and the Doctor is trying to find out more information about the Division. So they are kind of like the core fundamental storyline plot threads, aren't they, I suppose?
I'm guessing that's the sort of series arc, if you will.
Yeah.
And there'll be like smaller subplot elements that weave into that, I guess.
Definitely. So I only have one off the top of my head at the moment, and I may reflect on this differently afterwards. The only criticism that I have of this particular episode tonight kind of reflects on what I said a bit ago, and I'm guessing that either one of you may sort of not necessarily agree with me on this. I felt like it was packing possibly too much in terms of content, because we were kind of like the pacing was incredibly fast, and I'm a little bit of a Goldilocks viewer. I like a sweet spot, and it felt like it was moving just a bit too fast for me. We had the setup with Dan, and we get the idea of what his character's like, and then suddenly there's another character thrown in, and then suddenly the Weeping Angels appear, and then suddenly we find out about the what they call the Lupines, or the Lupinistas, or Lupari. Thank you. So the Lupari are a race that are suddenly there. We've got to sort of absorb that, and oh look, it's the Sontarans, and we're in Victorian Liverpool. And for me, the pacing of this episode, and I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to basically sort of unpack everything as quickly as they could into a 50-minute slot as a setup, but I still feel like it was just a smidge too much too quickly. Like maybe they could have possibly. It depends how it's going to pan out. Does that sound legit? I don't know whether or not I'm barking there. Pun not intended.
So I hear what you're saying, but I really do disagree. I think the problem is, so yeah, there was a lot going on, but pacing wise, I think it flowed quite nicely. I mean, I'll ask you, I'll ask you a question. If you take out sort of the plot elements from it, all the stuff they threw at you, right? Talking about introducing Dan, sort of Dan's love interest, for lack of a better phrase, going and meeting sort of what's going on with the Sontarans. Did any of it feel like you were being thrown information that you couldn't process?
A little bit, but then maybe I'm just slow.
Yeah, in your old age, just getting ahead of you, maybe. But I didn't feel like, although I had questions about how it was all going to link together and what the overarching plot was, I didn't feel so bombarded by information that I was lost.
I don't know.
It did feel a little bit breakneck speed to me, but I don't mind that. I like rewatching things anyway, and I would. But we know what happens when you watch things that are a bit too slow. I know, right?
I'm going to sit down in front of the censor eyes again. That's for certain.
I'm definitely not falling asleep during this episode, so I'm not sure.
No, definitely.
But yeah, I would rather have too much to think about than not enough.
I suppose there is that as well. Maybe just kind of like I was trying to keep up on everything, and there was a lot of funny little moments sort of tossed in there. There was the Doctor's reference to her Scottish accent, the name dropping of Nitro 9, which gave me a little boner. I love that little drop in there. There was loads of little things that were kind of like just dropped throughout, and I thought they were pretty cool. You messaged me actually at the start, Cook, saying that it was your favourite ever cold opener, and I'm inclined to possibly.
No, I didn't say favourite ever. I just mean
in
this
era.
I've done for a while.
Yeah. Okay. No, fair enough. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think this is kind of like the strongest cold opener that we've had in Whisker's era. Anyway, it was action packed and quite funny, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There was tons going on it, and I do like what they managed to do in terms of subverting your expectations. So we were led to believe that Carvanista, the Mancunian dog man, were basically like, and his species were bad guys. And then I like the clever concept of the Lupari basically being this species who are species bonded to humans to look after them. I think that's quite a clever little concept, and I like that as part of the story that kind of like envelops, kind of like
very
we're led to believe.
Moffat thing to do.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, sort of twisting
taking man's best friend as a concept and turning it into an alien.
Exactly that. I am wondering whether or not there are futuristic species who've time travelled. Is that what we're led to believe? Because they were talking about his ship being enveloped in temporal energy. Are we led to believe that they're time travellers, or...?
No, I think that's the disturbance that his ship hit that allowed him to get there earlier.
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense then, now that you mention it.
Still, I love the bit where him and Dan are having the conversation and Dan strokes his face.
I know. I was absolutely pissing myself.
Not only is it brilliant, but it's a very human reaction. I'd imagine that's how most people would respond.
Yeah, I thought that was fantastic. And then he kept, what did you call me, when he called him a dog? Really, absolutely brilliant. But yeah, fantastic. I was expecting, to be honest with you, in terms of this particular first episode, because Spyfall had that epic twist at the end, I think I was waiting for that, and it never came. And that kind of, even though it was a very, very cool cliffhanger, of course, with that whole sequence where 13's just beating the crap out of the TARDIS, and then she's like, right, I'm just going to split the console open and feed you vortex energy. I get the
big yellow truck last time.
Yeah, basically. But I like the fact that, I like the fact maybe it was just a little anticlimactic, or my expectations were a little higher than I anticipated. Basically, I think that's what I'm getting at.
I think the fact that there's so much packed in probably negated the need for one big epic cliffhanger.
Possibly, yeah.
Like, I think the intention was to get people to stick around to see how everything unfolds, as opposed to this one particular thing that happened at the end. So, I mean,
to add to that as well, it's still a fairly big cliffhanger.
Oh, huge! Yeah.
Earth about to be annihilated. Doctor's trying to use the heart of the TARDIS, which has failed on it, being chased by this sentient, devouring storm. There's a lot happening there.
No, definitely. And then we're being drip fed these kind of hints of basically this time before the Doctor is now actually finally catching up with her, which feels to me a little bit too coincidental in terms of the Doctor's story and timeline, but that's probably intentional. We'll probably find out why it's kind of relevant to the 13th Doctor's era rather than this sort of stuff, creeping into the 10th Doctor's era or the 9th Doctor's era, stuff like that. I guess we'll find that out as to why it's pertinent to 13 and what she's discovered later on in the series, perhaps. If we get the answers, we may not. We may never get answers to the questions they're sowing at the moment. We may just get a resolution and it's never covered. But as a story, first episode, personally, I thought it was good, if not a little too fast. I think that's that's the way that I sit with that particular one. May chew on it with a review. I don't know. But of course,
I'm definitely keen to rewatch it because with a lot of the previous stuff, I found that my appreciation diminishes as time goes on. So
yeah, that's true.
It'll be interesting to. I mean, I'll wait until the whole series is out to make any final judgments, but it'll be fun to find out, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, yeah, and I'd love to talk about once we're finished with the season on a whole, to see how it stands now that we know the whole story. But
yes, of course.
At this moment in time, I'm excited and I enjoyed it.
If we're going to find out, we'll talk more about that later. If we're going to find out, but we mentioned this. Obviously, there was a hell of a lot of cast in this particular episode. They were setting them all up. To try and cover as many of them as we can in the podcast time episode that we got. Of course, the Doctor. Not to focus too much on her character, I think we've been fairly critical of Whittaker's performance and the writing for the 13th Doctor throughout the past couple of series, haven't we? And we don't do it in any sort of derogatory or diminishing way. We just don't necessarily like the way that the portrayal's kind of sometimes performed, although she does have really strong moments. I think she did all right tonight. I don't really feel like there are any particular moments. There was, of course, the moments with the technobabble, which we've discussed in the past. I don't know if you guys kind of felt a little awkward with those moments at all.
I didn't notice anything that annoyed me. I thought this was probably her best performance to date.
Definitely the strongest. I personally feel like she's definitely comfortable in the boots now. I've got no criticism of the way that she performed in today. I can't remember. There was a specific part. I think it was possibly maybe when she was under the TARDIS console, and her and Yaz are doing that banter. And I thought back to last week or the week before, Cook, when you were talking about how when they're writing the scripts, the way the scripts are written are very much kind of like actor one says something and actor two responds in a very sort of monotone fashion, and it's that kind of like level of dialogue that happens. And it felt like there was a bit of that in the TARDIS, especially towards the start of the episode anyway, between her and Yaz. But yeah, I don't really think there's much more you can say about 13 apart from she definitely feels like she's at her strongest at the moment, doesn't she? In the role, definitely. Yaz
is as well.
Yeah,
she's doing things. That's the best thing I can say about it.
What's the common denominator here? What is the common denominator? It's obvious when you think about it. It's just the two of them. There's no sort of like dead weight floating around in the TARDIS. There's actually a role for Yaz to do something, because there's no Graham and Ryan just fanning around in the background, kind of taking up scene space. It actually feels like she's got something to do.
There's probably people that are going to argue about the finer points of whether she should know enough to fly the TARDIS and say all the crap that she was saying.
Nissa could fly the TARDIS though. So,
exactly, and Clara's all that. So
yeah,
I think it works. It's definitely more entertaining to watch than what she's been given before. So
and we're led to believe again that they've been traveling together for a while now. Yes. So the fact that she is able to fly part of the TARDIS, I didn't feel outright wronged by that sentence. I think it's more than reasonable, because plenty of companions have been involved in it. Hell,
exactly.
Even Donna got to go.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I completely agree with that. I don't hold any kind of like issue with the fact that a human can pilot the TARDIS, because it's happened repeatedly in the past. It's not a problem. I've just remembered actually the bit that I was referring to earlier. It wasn't one of the. It's the cold opener. It's that bit of awkward dialogue when they're hanging upside down. To me, that just felt a bit stilted. But apart from that, yeah, you're right. Throughout the rest of the episode, both characters really, they've got a chance to shine, because they don't have to split the action between four of them. And I think that's part of the key thing. I think that's just perfect having that. And I think it'll work having Dan there as well as like two extra people. But Dan then, new companion, thoughts? Matt, what are your thoughts on Dan? Come
on. So far I like him. He feels very grounded. Without meaning to sound a bit too on the nose, he feels incredibly human. Like a lot of companions come on there a bit wide-eyed and dazzled, and reactions as more shock and awe, which is what you expect. But everything that I've seen so far about Dan feels like a very reasonable or sarcastic reaction to things, and I've quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, completely agree. What about you, Cut? Jury's out. I'm judging by that.
No, I do actually. I did actually enjoy him, but I'm just thinking that I like the organic way that he's brought onto the TARDIS scheme, and you actually called this, didn't you? Like a week or so ago.
What did I say? What was
you predicted that he would get kidnapped and the Doctor would have to rescue him.
Well, that was only because I put two and two together, and I've seen the photograph in the background, the promo shot of Carvanista, and there's a figure in the background, and then they released another promo shot of John Bishop, well, Dan, with his face between two cell bars, and I was like, those cell bars look the same, so I think that must be what's going on. But I guess as a character goes, I think he's pretty quite good, solid. Isn't he? Yeah, quite solid. I tell you what I do really appreciate, and I actually felt kind of quite like a powerful little scene, the fact that he's poor. And it's a really common thing, but it was so gently touched on, and it wasn't thrust down our throats like previous messages have been. It was just a hint. This guy's got no food in his cupboards.
Yeah, cupboards are bad. Nothing's happening.
He volunteers at a food bank as well.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what the hell the deal is with the museum. What the fuck's that all about?
The music.
The museum. He just likes to walk around museums telling people about Liverpool.
Quirk of his character.
Well, the other bit I was
pretty hard drug.
And the other bit I was getting very I was making a note of in the back of my brain talk about, because I felt very smug about it. I was like, if he's so poor, how come the Doctor's watched and just found a really fancy laptop? And they answered it as the episode went on. I was like, oh, I feel a bit stupid now.
It's always good when that happens.
That was clever.
Yeah, I know, but I was doing my aha, I've noticed something, and then immediately got shot down.
Right as plot hole, exactly. I tell you what I do like about Dan, though, and it's the same thing, and I said this ages ago, and I stick by it. Comedians are great drama actors, because when you can master comedy, you can master the breadth of human emotion, I think. I think it's a lot harder
knowing
to
when to crack a joke and not knowing when to crack a joke, I think is actually a really important skill.
Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, that's
not only that, but actually the comedy writing in this episode was really quite.
It was pretty good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It wasn't. It wasn't on your
sequence release and then relief.
yeah, very much. So.
That was glorious. And again, even hearing Jodie Whittaker try to put on a Scottish accent was fantastic.
That was brilliant. Yeah, all these. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. But I tell you what, I did like. I did like the way that the Doctor and Dan first properly meet, and they're running, and Yaz says, "Oh, this is Doctor. This is Dan." She says, "Nice to meet you, Dan. Run for your life," which is a callback, obviously, to 9 when he's meeting. But they're basically being chased down a corridor by the Carboneista firing shots at them. Fantastic. I've got a lot of hope and positive feelings about Dan, and John Bishop's performance is brilliant. Really, really good.
Again, it's not just John. I want to give credit to all the other actors we've been talking about as well. So the subplots that are coming up, because there wasn't anybody who was on screen that felt dismissive or lacking skill or out of place, like you said. Everybody felt like everybody had that extra moment on screen to really give them that tiny little bit more humanity.
Let's just focus very specifically, very briefly, on one character and the big question mark over her, and that is the character of Claire, who very briefly appears in the street, and she's obviously meeting the Doctor and Yaz out of time, and she knows them, and she subtly drops the hint that she's going home the long way round. Now, I don't think this is too far a fetch to go to assume that she is another Doctor. She's another Ruth Doctor. This is my theory. We can talk about this more later, but the character of Claire, as we're moving through the characters, she just felt a little bit too, I don't know, in the know, if that's a fair enough reach.
I know why you think that, but it just seems like it's going to be a red herring.
Very well could be.
I agree. I can see how you've got there, but to me, I think from just the scenes when she was actually on screen, I don't think that's the case with her.
Oh, interesting. Okay, we shall see. We shall have to see. Of course, there's plenty of other characters. Vinder, we got very little to see from him other than he's some sort of guardian of the universe. There was God blimey, there was the Sontarans we've got a very brief look at. I'm worried, guys. I'm going to throw it out there. I'm worried about how they're getting handled. Do you know why I'm saying that? Did the comedy vibe of the Sontarans kind of come through a little bit in that scene?
Yeah, but it's definitely not in the same way that Strax is handled.
Was it not though? I'm nervous. So we will find out next week.
Did you watch the trailer for War of the Sontarans?
Briefly. Yes.
Did you catch the line at the end by the Sontarans?
I don't think so. No. What was the line at the end?
Well, basically, one of them just says, "We agree to your terms of a massacre."
So this is my issue with the Sontarans again. They're just redoing it. They're kind of treating them as if they're kind of, it was never like that in the classic era. Lynx the Sontaran was incredibly calculating, manipulative, cold, logical. Wasn't remotely comical. Same with I can't remember the name of the one from the Sontaran experiment, but basically I'm worried. I'm not going to go on to a rant. I'm just worried. Okay.
You'll find out in a week.
Save it, because this time next week you'll either go, "Oh, that's such a relief," or "I bloody knew it."
Yeah, very much. Although nice to see Dan Starkey reprising his role.
Moment, don't worry.
It was nice to see Dan. Yeah, nice to see Dan Starkey reprising his brief role. I wonder if that was his only cameo, or if he's going to be back as a couple of different Sontarans.
Possibly. It's difficult to tell it was him, to be fair.
I could hear it just in the accent, in the lilt, a little bit.
There's a little bit of Strax in there, wasn't there?
There was a tiny bit, wasn't there? Which is fine, because they're a clone species, I can buy that. Yeah. There are two important characters that we haven't discussed, but I think it's mainly because we don't know enough about them, and that is Swarm and whoever his sister is. I don't know the actress's name. I feel terrible for forgetting her name. She was in... oh God, blimey! But Line of Duty. She was in Line of Duty. I don't know if you got that far with watching it, Cook. But I think they were in Norway or Sweden somewhere. It was her and her partner.
That bloke that got disintegrated.
And it turns out somehow she is Swarm's supposed sister. So I don't know what the link is there. That's all feels a little different, doesn't it? Really, I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, because they got summoned as well. That's the other bit we need to make sure we remind. They got summoned to attend somewhere for dire circumstances, but refused.
That's right.
It's a bit chameleon arch, isn't it? Really, the way she was hiding, but
yeah, especially with the summons thing.
It seems like I don't know.
I think
why did she ignore it? What was that summoning thing about?
I get the impression, like you just mentioned, there's a chameleon Archie feeling about with her particular character anyway, in the context of she's happy living her life with this guy, and she doesn't want to have to go back to war or be summoned by whoever it is that's after her. Could it be the Division? Could it be something else? Could it have been Swarm calling her? We just don't know. And I think there's big question marks over stuff like that. But Swarm, he was channeling, or they're channeling big Voldemort vibes out of him, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
Well, big Voldemort vibes.
His pre-rejuvenation look was better than the one he's got. But...
Yes, yeah, I'm kind of inclined to agree with you there. Although I think from certain angles, I quite like the costume though, the outfit for Swarm. I think it's particularly creepy. You know, shards of crystal kind of coming out of his face and metal teeth, bright eyes.
What is actually going on there is, so the whole thing with the Division, they're just incarcerating basically universal threats, I guess.
Well, we don't know.
And this is kind of where sort of speculation begins, isn't it? Because, you know, the other question I've got to ask is how long has Swarm actually been free? Because if it's recent, then was that Division operatives attending and then he escaped and then all this kicked off at the same time? Or has he waited around for something?
Exactly.
You know,
also,
there are questions there to be asked.
Another big question is, in terms of the Division itself, not just about Swarm, the Doctor just mentioned that Carvanista was a Division operative. So obviously the Division aren't just confined to Gallifreyans or Time Lords. They are beyond them, whatever it is. So are they some sort of like universal Illuminati, the Division? That's why they've never been part of Gallifreyan history before. We just don't know. I feel like there's lots of characters we missed. There are probably like minor characters and tidbits and stuff like that we haven't really covered. But we're going to be able to cover them because they're all going to get spoken and featured more heavily in each individual episode. Feels weird there's only 5 episodes left though, doesn't it? Considering we normally used to like a 10 episode run. Well, 10/12 episode run.
It makes a better series. I'm all for it, to be honest.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It's your brother is a little bit of a weird feeling, but
and there's so much going on as well, which is just making it interesting. Have I missed any characters? Are there any characters that you guys can think of?
I'm trying to think. I mean, there is Diane at the end that got a sort of enticed into that house by Swarm's sister.
I mean, does that imply that Dan is more than we think he is? And you know, is there some link with the fact that the Carvanista managed to get to Dan quicker than the rest of the battalion?
This is going to annoy you, but I'm actually getting a kind of Ruth vibe from Dan.
No, I agree. I was going to suggest that, but then I thought, no, that sounds too stupid.
Guiding people around a museum, volunteering at a food bank.
Yep. Yeah, I was getting the exact same vibes, and it would make me chuckle in some respects if he turned out to be the 14th Doctor, and it's all a big ruse. You know, he's on some sort of witness relocation scheme or something, but we're moving into speculation and unanswered question territory there, so we should probably leave that for later. But in terms of characters, there's Diane. What's her her connection to all of this? There's the Joseph Williamson character. Again, what's his connection to this? And then there's characters that we haven't even touched upon yet from what we've seen that are going to come up in later episodes. So there's so much to absorb, and you're right, definitely needs to do a rewatch to get a better understanding of the characters and the story in there. So, visualies. Put my teeth back in.
Visually, a very visually.
Yes, and then, dude, visuals. So, in terms of visuals for this particular episode, it was a treat for the eyes, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I loved it.
It's literally never been better.
No denying that.
As someone who loves cracking planets on Stellaris, it made me very
Well, they're a bit more unbidden, aren't they, really, the Flux?
Don't ruin this for me. I enjoyed it.
The Flux was definitely chewing its way through a fair few rendering processes when it was chewing up some of those planets, wasn't it? Which was pretty interesting to see. But yeah, loads of pretty visuals going on. The only again sort of like bit that I thought felt a little ropey. There were 2 bits. One of the bits was specifically the cold open. It felt very green screeny in parts. I appreciate they can't transport Jodie Whittaker and Mandip Gill to an alien planet to film, but it still felt a little bit kind of like okay.
The only bit from that felt really bad, that felt poor to me, was them both falling before they fell into the TARDIS. Apart from that, I think it still looked brilliant. I thought the effect was poor.
Oh, I loved it. I felt like it looked pretty seamless, to be fair.
Oh, okay, interesting. Because I thought everything up to that looked as well as you could make it, given the fact they didn't actually have locations.
I could tell it was artificial, but I didn't think it looked bad.
Yeah.
No, so just to confirm, talking about what Chris said there is when we're talking about that entire scene feeling green screeny, that was the only bit that felt green screeny to me.
Yeah, very true. Although did you notice the weird transition as the camera's doing a panoramic of Liverpool, of Albert Dock or Liverpool or the Mersey, and then it goes into the museum, and it got a bit stuttery almost. And then,
that was weird.
What the hell was that? That was really bizarre. That was really, really, really odd filming. It was like the camera got so close that the glass started to get fuzzy, and then it almost kind of like went for a really weird transition.
Probably because it's not actually a museum building, maybe, so they can't go straight through the window. But I don't know.
Maybe, did I? No, that was really odd. But the rest of the visuals in this episode were fantastic. The set design was amazing.
I was talking about the set design. Sorry, I had to bring it up because I loved it. I adored the doors popping up all over the TARDIS.
Yes, I was going to mention this. That was weird. That was beautiful. The way that the TARDIS is basically just really
beautifully done. It's a really weird something is wrong quirk.
Yeah. Especially that there was that slightly off kilter TARDIS entrance the first time it happened, and it's slightly skewed, like it's twisted. That was beautiful. That was really perfectly done.
Back of the room instead of the normal location. Yes. Like the normal door was still there. But...
completely thrown out of place, wasn't it? Yeah. And then when they come through again, and the bloody doors in the floor, that's fantastically done as well. I do like the subtle lighting changes as well in the console room. So the TARDIS is kind of getting sicker, obviously, and we can see that the crystalline structure of the TARDIS is changing because it's turning slightly redder colour, and certain other crystal elements are like blue and gold. I don't know if you noticed that.
Also melting.
And the melting thing was pretty cool as well, whatever that's all about. And then we were kind of like treated to things like the Weeping Angel takedown. That was pretty cool. We got to see.
Not only did that come out of the blue, but I really like the fact that they clearly went back to dealing with Weeping Angels the old way, as in sort of our own being able to see it on screen meant that it wouldn't move at all.
Yes,
and that is the right way to do Weeping Angels. That scene, even though we all knew where that scene was going to end, or as I was pretty confident where it was going to end, I did feel my heartbeat go up a bit because I was like, that is a good scene. They put that together very well.
Oh, definitely. It was the way that she got in, and then we saw like the reflection of the Weeping Angel's angry face in her eye, and then cut to a long shot of her bit
where when it gets so close that it could basically breathe on her, we're expecting scary face, for lack of a better phrase, but we didn't. We still got hands over the face when it was that close. I was like,
yes,
you did a lot of good changes there.
That was very clever. That whole scene was running.
My thought behind that was I thought another one was going to pop up behind her because it didn't want to see.
I thought there was going to be one in the door. Yeah,
that would have been really clever. Yeah, no, that never crossed my mind. That it was nice to see them come back and have a bit of action in there, though. Obviously, we're going to find out. What I suspect is going to happen is all of these threads are going to be picked up in separate episodes, and we're going to find out specifically what led to that moment for that particular character, if that makes sense. That would explain why she knows the Doctor and Yaz, but they don't know her yet because they're going to meet her in a future episode. And that whole sequence.
How she knows what an angel is.
Well, that as well. Yeah, I'm still riding on my on my fugitive Doctor theory. Definitely.
We'll see. You may be onto something, but we shall see.
But I think the majority of the visual budget in this particular episode went into all of those space shots, really, didn't they? You know, the swarm going nuts, consuming planets. That alien civilization being reduced to ash by this kind of wave moving through them as they screamed. That felt like very 60s Doctor Who, the way that they were like dressed in, blue skin, big heads, silver bodysuits type thing from the very, very brief 3 seconds of airtime that they had. There was loads of really cool stuff going on there. And it's not just necessarily about the visuals, but it's about the conceptualization of some of these visuals, like Carvanista's stun cube, I think it was called. That's a clever. It looked weird, but I think the concept, the idea that it looked weird, worked in his favor, if that makes sense. You know, when Carvanista shoots at Dan in his living room, and this blue sort of cube forms around him.
Yeah, there's definitely like a high sci-fi sort of visual style that they're going for, it seems.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And of course the costumes for Swarm and his sister we've just spoken about that, but the costume design as well on the what they call the Lambrini?
Lupari.
Lupari. We'll call them the Lambrini. I'm going to call them the Lambrini from now on. Good doggo Lambrini. But yeah, I mean, you can see that they've taken the money that they would have spent on location shoots and sunk it into the visuals for this, definitely. That whole sequence in the end, the last few minutes where the TARDIS is being chased by the Flux, and that just felt like a smorgasbord of beautiful CGI. There was just so much going on in that sequence. So much, especially with the visuals in terms of that sort of context.
I did like the touch how the TARDIS was literally horizontal, as if you could
desperate
tell
to get away.
It was doing
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you noticed that.
It was still being sucked back in. It was a very good effect.
Yeah, I thought that was absolutely stunning the way that worked. Absolutely brilliant. Really, really pleased that they kind of like put the TARDIS in proper jeopardy this time as well, which was really, really well done. Just thinking about it in terms of location, there was a ton of locations in this particular episode, probably more so than we've seen in any episode so far. I think that's fair to say, isn't it? Because they were certainly scattered all over the place. A lot of the action was in Liverpool, but in different locations. A lot of the action was across space, but again in different locations.
A little bit of, there's a little bit of different time zones as well. Also, some random planet that Swarm was on.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so wherever that was supposed to be, which was interesting, but again, God knows what that was all about. Okay, so I suppose from an episode point of view, then the only other thing that we haven't really touched upon is the soundtrack. I'm going to put my hands up and say very samey, disappointingly, from Sega Nakanola. I enjoyed it, but I was expecting something a bit more unique.
I don't know, I thought he did a good job this time. It's less ambient noise and more actual songs, actual tracks going on.
There wasn't anything that stood out in mind to me.
Now that you mention it, I'm not a massive music fan. I'm the type of person, as we all know, who likes to turn music off in the background of games and the like, but I didn't notice it, which means...
That's my point, Yeah,
exactly, which means that it was either... from my perspective, more of the same or nothing of note. And that doesn't mean it wasn't good. It just means that it blended in well with the scenes it was portraying.
I think like Spyfall was very kind of like thematic because it was a spy story, and therefore he was channeling a lot of kind of like James Bond and action music and stuff like that in his. So it was very bombastic with a lot of strings and brass and drums and stuff like that. This to me just felt like Sega Nakanola's best hits, sort of like combined into one. So there was nothing that kind of stood out in my mind as I was listening to it, because I've listened to like Fugitive of the Jadoon, that whole sequence where the Doctor discovers that Ruth is actually kind of previous version of herself and stuff like that. Fantastic. You're listening to it and it's getting the the blood pumping and your hair standing up on end. There wasn't really any scores in this particular episode that did that for me. Not to say it was bad, just there wasn't anything that was kind of like punching above his usual standard, which
I wish I could disagree, but you kind of
twisted your arm
because you've said that. I can't pick out a specific track that I really enjoyed, but I know the music was there.
Yeah. Oh well, I mean, it's not to say it was bad by any stretch. It just didn't kind of like jump out any amazing parts for me, which is unfortunate, I suppose.
I did enjoy it. It's just I can't remember it.
lasting impact then. Lasting impact. Okay, so we've kind of basically covered the basics of the Halloween apocalypse. There, kind of gone through everything: story, characters, visuals, soundtrack. Now we're going to do the hard task of rating it out of 10. So, on a first-time view, Cook, what would you give it out of 10 on a first-time view, fresh from watching?
An 8, a solid 8.
Solid 8. What about you, Matt?
7.
7? Interesting. I'm going to sit on the fence here, and I'm going to go for a 7 myself, just because it feels like it's the most, balanced point that you can really go with. So what we're saying is it was great, but it wasn't amazing. It wasn't kind of like Spyfall levels of twist at the end, but it was definitely good. Got our appetites wet, plenty of questions raised. I think that's a fair comment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, hugely. So speaking of questions raised then, we've got a bit of time to kind of like talk about speculation, unanswered questions. Where's it going to go? What do we think of next week's episode? So I guess in no particular order, let's just quickly kind of like address next week's episode. Chapter 2, War of the Sontarans. Matt, excited?
Yeah, well, again, because I'm more excited. Not so. Well, I can't think about it for a second because, like, If I was to say I was excited because I was going to see more Sontarans on the screen, I wouldn't necessarily be true. I'm keen to see what they do with them, and I'm keen to see where the story goes. But I'm keen to see where the overarching story goes. I think is probably more the best way I can describe it.
Yeah. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I want to see where Flux goes as opposed to specifically where the Sontarans go.
No, that's completely fair enough. What about you, Cook?
I'm definitely excited, but for similar reasons. I think most people are probably sitting here watching and going, well, that was great, but I really want to know what the hell is going on with this timeless backstory stuff.
Basically it, isn't it? Yeah, I'm with you both on that. I think it's now a question of...
And if we get a good few romps in between and all of that, then it's a bonus, really. But, yeah.
And I am really, really hoping, and I mentioned it right at the beginning as well, that this is very much a case of getting a whole episode with a whole one of these side stories and side characters that we spoke about, because I think it will get very old very quickly if they're trying to tell 5 separate stories all at the same time.
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree. I'm also looking forward to the historical aspect of next week, because as we're led to believe, it's set during the Crimean War. And I know absolutely nothing about the Crimean War. Not a jot. Didn't study it in school. No bugger all about it. I'm not a massive history buff. I do enjoy it, but, I know nothing about it. So I'm looking forward to actually picking something up from it next week. It's got Mary Seacole, whoever she is, which sounds terrible. It's probably like avid historians listening to this and screaming.
Or something.
Yeah, I'm sure Florence Nightingale was part of the Crimean War as well. So it's interesting they chose not to go with her, but, oh well. So that's next week. So... speculation and unanswered questions, and we've kind of touched upon this last few minutes now. We've kind of touched upon this throughout the course of today's episode, and we've sort of spoken about kind of what our interpretations of things are. I think the key thing is, though, this season is going to be resolving the questions of who the hell are the Division and what is their involvement in stuff.
Swarm as well.
And who is Swarm? Are they connected to the Division somehow?
He seems to know an awful lot about them, including their sort of sign-off line.
Well, yeah, and Bo imprisoned by them, wasn't he?
I mean, in terms of theories, plenty of things are going through my head at the moment, one of which is are a lot of these characters, surplus characters that we're seeing, including Swarm, somehow connected to the Doctor? As in, like, are they a deviation of the Doctor? Like the Valiard, perhaps? Swarm has led us to believe that him and the Doctor were former enemies when she was a member of the Division. So, what does that mean? What could that mean? What could it mean? What is she? Was Swarm the equivalent of the Doctor's master back in the Division days? Who knows?
We just don't know, do we?
No.
There's barely anything to go on, really, so far.
But I've got strong feelings that Swarm and the Flux itself are heavily connected. Everything else, I think, is going to be connection points.
That's a really good point. Well, you asked this earlier. I've only just tweaked what you were asking, actually. So, I can't remember. Blimey, this is my brain. I'm only talking about an hour ago. Did Swarm create Flux? Or the Flux?
I don't know, but this is kind of the point that I was. Yeah, and this is kind of the point that I was asking, which is did Swarm escaping the Division? Did that happen recently, and therefore the Flux has happened because he's escaped, or is him resurfacing now because he's triggered something that starts it off, or are they completely two unrelated events?
Well, this is the thing. Like, Fugitive of the Jadoon, for example, happened parallel to our current Doctor, but it's a past version of Gallifrey, past version of Doctor, etc. So there's some weird sort of
crossover,
a time crossover going on.
Very much so.
So it seems like it's present, but also.
Well, one of the things that's really confusing me about the whole kind of the point you just made there with the Fugitive era is that, from my understanding, Gallifrey was supposedly time locked. And if it's destroyed and moved to the end of the universe, then it shouldn't be existing at the same time as, contemporary Earth's timeline, if that makes sense. So there shouldn't be a version of Gat and Ruth running around 21st century Earth, attacking each other. So I'm still wondering if we're dealing with a parallel here, parallel reality, alternate timelines kind of bleeding into each other and stuff like that. There is one aspect of Flux which kind of ever so slightly, I wouldn't say disappointed me, but I was hoping it was going to be more than just what we were getting, which is that it on the face of it, and I suspect it will, it may change. On the face of it, it's just this big cloud that destroys energy and particles and matter. And I was kind of hoping it was going to be a little more than that. I was hoping it was going to be something that's coming along and is kind of like changing things. So things that were going to be are now something completely different.
Maybe we don't know that isn't the case.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, so that may very well happen. Because of course,
it is on the face of it just the reality bomb, though.
That's it. Which is the sci-fi trope, isn't it? As far as we know. Well, that's it. Yeah, that's the sci-fi trope of everything, pretty much. Final thoughts, then, guys. Brilliant episode. We enjoyed it. Good strong opener. Tons of questions. What are you looking forward to, sort of like getting out of this series the most, Cook?
Definitely some meaty Gallifrey backstory. I think I do love the concept of the Division, like an actual Time Lord interference agency as opposed to non-interference. So
okay, fair enough.
It'd be interesting to see where that leads.
Yeah, fair play. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, so it's quite similar. I want the backstory too. I want to find out more about the Division, see where it goes, but I also want to see what historic Doctor has been up to, for lack of a better phrase. What did the Division version of the Doctor do, particularly, we're talking about sort of the interaction with Swarm and whatnot, and what other meanies could be out there.
Fair play. Me personally, controversially, I would like a healthy retcon. I would like it to be something that doesn't kind of take away the fact that the first Doctor was the first Doctor, and that's that. I would like there to be a consistent, tangent alternate reality where all these previous Doctors existed, but it doesn't kind of relate directly to the first Doctor. That's asking a bit too much specifically, but that's kind of what I'd like out of this. If not that, then something that would kind of like not be so on the nose as to say that all of that is verbatim and that's the way it is. Make it a little looser, little more open to interpretation by the individual, rather than this is what actually happened sort of thing, as we've discussed in the past. Okay, so that feels like that was 45 minutes that flew by at breakneck speed, very much like this evening's episode. So thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe on our Twitter, Facebook and YouTube channels. That's right, we're on YouTube now, where we'll be bringing you new reviews and content every Monday. Join us next week as we dive into the War of the Sontarans, but until then, it's a goodbye from us.